Hola everyone, I'm Summer Dawn, the founder and director of In Full Color, here for Hispanic Notes with Dr. Grisel Y. Acosta. Grisel is an associate professor at the City University of New York's Bronx Community College, the editor of the anthology Latina Outsiders, Remaking Latina Identity, a three-time In Full Color alumna, and the author of the book we're discussing today, Things to Pack on the Way to Everywhere, which is a finalist for the Andres Montoya Poetry Prize and is forthcoming from Get Fresh Books in 2021. So, Grisel, it is so wonderful to see you. Please tell everyone about yourself as a writer, as an artist, as an educator.
Hi, Summer. This is so great. I'm so happy to be here. And thank you so much for doing this. And thank you to Hispanic Dotes, of course, specifically Diana Diaz over there. I have been a professional visual artist since I was 16 years old. That's literally when I sold my first drawing. I should say that the cover art for Things to Pack on the Way to Everywhere is actually my own photography. And I've been a professional writer since I was in my early 20s, starting at the Columbia College Chronicle and extra bilingual community newspapers in Chicago. So that's actually for several decades. I've been an educator for about 25 years. And I started when I was in the Master's in Education program at the University of Illinois in Chicago. That's my birthplace. And I started writing poetry specifically in high school, but my real birth as a poet came several years later. My journey to this book has been really a slow one. I've been reading my poetry publicly since 1999 in New York City and publishing my work since 2000. This particular book is about journey, confronting sexism, racism, as a mixed race Afro-Latina, confronting my reactions to that, and defending one's right to be different and still be respected. It's also about growing up and the loss that comes with that road, but also finding incredible joy from the things that you hold on to or the things that you pack along that road, despite devastating loss and trauma. So there's stuff in there about caring for my elderly family, my parents, navigating academia as a queer woman of color, and still finding my center in a radical punk perspective and finding time for dancing.
I love that. I love that. It sounds like it's about so many wonderful, wonderful, interesting things. I'm so glad that I got to take a peek at your manuscript and read some of the amazing poems. I can't wait to sit down with the actual book in my hands. I've noticed that in a lot of your work, and you actually just kind of alluded to this, there's this distinct reverence for a lot of the identities that intersect to make you you, from your Latinidad to your Blackness. So I wanted to know, how does being Afro Latina create a unique lens for you as a writer?
Yeah, it's such a complicated thing to think about, but I do think that anyone who is underrepresented in a patriarchal neoliberal world is going to have a different perspective from the overrepresented majority that, if you think about it, it stole the land that it lives on. But for me specifically, I am of mixed race, and because of the overt racism in previous generations in my family, specifically, and I talk about this in the book, or write about it, I should say, specifically, my grandfather did not go to my parents' wedding because of my father's race. So I feel the need to call attention to my Afro ancestry. Um, However, and again, this goes back to being of mixed race. I recently learned, and this is something that my mom just shared with me. I want to say in the last couple of years. My grandmother's grandfather on my father's side, so this is several generations back, I believe, was a cacique in Colombia. Um, and I'm slowly learning about my possible ancestry in that regard, specifically the Tairuna people. So it certainly would explain my grandmother, my grandmother's incredible knowledge of plant life in the region when she was alive. Um, all of these knowledges shape how I see the world, how I see family, and really how I see our foreign policy in other countries. So I'm kind of always drawing from that. But you know, not just foreign policy, but our own policy here in the US and how we treat each other and how we interact with each other.
Wow, I love how there's so many different parts of you that are so interesting and that you're continually discovering. And actually, that reminds me, one of my favorite themes in your work is how you play with destruction and construction, reconstruction, intellectually and physically, disfiguration, transformation. I can't help but think that this comes from watching too many punk music videos as a kid, which I know you reference in your book. So, how is being punk, being hardcore, how has that influenced how you view this transformation, this reinvention of yourself?
Well, first of all, I just want to say there's no possible way that one can watch too many punk videos. I'm just going to stand by that. but no, but seriously, there's also another misconception that and not on your part, but just in general, I want to clarify that punk means bands like Minor Threat and X-Ray Specs alone. But I want to just point out that true punks are ready to listen to all kinds of music, like, and I say this from my own personal experience and referencing my own record collection. Listen to people like Engelbert Humperdinck and Leontine Price. It's more about being open to as many voices as possible. But you know, you bring up a really, really good point about the interrogation, uh, that folks who grew up truly understanding what punk is, that they bring to the table. As a younger person, I grew up with a mother who adored analysis, of books, of art, music, everything. And that training affected my own way of thinking. So naturally, I gravitated toward the punk ideology because it too believes that everything and everyone needs to be questioned, especially we need to question ourselves. So this is kind of like a check and a balance to power, even the power we ourselves wield in whatever capacity we might have, whether it be at home, in the workplace, or in a larger venue. So this does not necessarily mean that we have to be overly critical or lack understanding, or empathy. On the contrary, it's not productive um, to question one's motives without empathy. Transformation, reinvention for the self and for the community is a slow process, one where you're constantly looking at yourself and tinkering and looking at the larger picture or organizations and so forth. It's slow, but it's very exciting. And I believe that outsiders, people on the fringes of the centered community have a unique insight as to what changes are needed to because these outsiders are often the people who are suffering the most, and they need the changes for their survival. They just have that perspective. They can see the larger picture because they're literally looking at it from the fringes. So I think that they come up with the freshest ideas, the freshest art, the freshest commentary. It really allows us to grow. And for me, I see my differences as my assets. Um, they speak to me and they guide me towards what I feel is the truest and deepest learning.
That's so beautiful. I love that. And it's just such a marvel seeing your mind unravel this and being able to express yourself in such a way. And I guess you get that from your mom and your mom's analysis. Actually, I love the strong women you allude to throughout your whole work. There's a very specifically named influence from Lauryn Hill. There's a gorgeous tribute to your mom, Revolution Mommy, one of my favorites. She's also a hero in Hardcore Latina Punk Birth Fragments, which is the first poem I've ever seen from you and how we started our relationship. Can you tell me a little more about how these women inspire you?
Yeah, I do. And I do want to, before I continue on with the women, I do want to point out that um, my dad was an incredible orator. He was a public speaker. And I do feel that my parents both influenced um, my life as a writer in their own ways. But yes, to center the women, because my dad was centered most of my life. There are many women that come up in the book, like Lauryn Hill. Those poems that are a response to her work are also in celebrating 20 years of Black girlhood, the Lauryn Hill Reader. And that was edited by M. Billier Sankofa Waters, Venus Evans Winters, and Bettina L. Love. I just wanted to shout them out. But other women I allude to in the book are, of course, my mother, Polystyrene from X-Ray Specs, and her birth name was Marion Joan Elliott Said. I believe that she grew up in England. I mentioned Celia Cruz. I mentioned Leontine Price, who I already shouted out earlier. She's an incredible opera singer. And there are others. The female artists that I mention directly or indirectly inspire me through their art, their incredible, beautiful art, and the odds that they faced in creating that art. My mother, I have a complicated relationship with her, as many women have with their moms. But what I try to look at when I write about her is the world that she was placed in from birth and how she was expected to function in it. She was placed into a very religious and sexist and patriarchal world, as many of us are. She grew up in extreme poverty. And somehow, despite all of that, she has outlived everyone around her. Let me say a specific thing that she lived through. She when she married my dad, she left her the degree that she was pursuing. She later finished it, but she did leave school to marry my father. And then he found a church to work at in the Colombian jungle. And she didn't have a say. So she was nursing my oldest brother in the Colombian jungle. And when that would happen, snakes would come up because they would detect the milk. And that's the type of thing that she lived with, that she lived through with, under life with my father. And she took care of my ailing father, who, before he passed away, suffered from Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. So she literally gave everything that she had to that relationship. And I believe that she deserved more time to think about her own goals and to decide what her role would be, regardless of her husband and children. But she was a silent woman most of her life and still is. So despite all of that, despite that role for her, she raised a daughter who ultimately does have a life where her goals are the center. And I owe my mom a great deal of respect for that. And thanks for that. It's just undeniable. My mom does not look like the strong women that you see on social media. You know, these stunning photos, shot at angles that project power. She's never been seen that way. She's never projected herself that way. She's the type of person that people do not look at. But I see everything that she sacrificed, and I try to share some of it in the book.
That's so beautiful. That I love how you are able to pay tribute to her strength, even if it's the strength that we normally don't see. I think that there's something that a lot of women can do to offer and to inspire other people around them. I mean, how do you hope you can inspire other women?
That's a really challenging question for me. But you know, I do hope that that people uh, of any gender identity, of I hope that folks see me as someone who, despite the odds, did it her way. My path has been very, very long. It's been, you know, there were folks who were expecting me to have a book 20 years ago, when I first started writing poetry. And I chose to place myself in spaces that center people of color. And that path is slower. I chose not to put myself in situations where I would be judged unfairly by people who do not understand someone who has my kind of makeup. Again, mixed race, Afro-Latina, very radical, different ideology. I believe in humanity. I don't believe in the stock exchange. Multilingual. I have so many different spaces psychologically that I reside in. Queer. It's not easy for people to accept someone like me, but somehow, with a lot of patience and eventually good health care, didn't have good health care for most of my life either. Somehow I'm still here. I hope that people see that as a good and honest journey, and one of integrity. And I that's the most that I can hope for, really.
I love that. I think it's beautiful. And just so you know, you inspire me. I'm definitely inspired
You
by,
inspire me.
oh my goodness. It's just a love test. Um, I I am so honored that I got to talk with you today. Thank you so much for sharing so much about your artistry, sharing your journey, sharing your wisdom. and of course sharing this book with the world. Please tell us, how can we get our hands on it?
Yes. So as the time of at the time of this taping, the pre-order link is already at Get Fresh Books. So you can easily Google that. That comes right up. And it will also be on the Hispanic Dotes site. And it's also on my website, grito.org. And you know, if you see this down the road, the link to many different spaces where you can buy the book, including Amazon, that'll be available in all those sites, on all those sites as well. So thank you for ordering.
That's amazing. Yes, everyone, please check out Things to Pack on the Way to Everywhere by Dr. Grisel Y. Acosta. Thank you so much for watching, and we hope that you get inspired by Grisel's work.
Thank you so much, Summer.
Thank you, Grisel. Bye, everyone.